Good afternoon, guys. Dan here from Industry IoT. I hope you're well. Welcome to today's online digital dialogue virtual workshop session with Ron Brodt from Wind River. Ron is the Director of Industrial Solutions and Business Development at Wind River. And as you can see, the theme of the session today is all about 5G technology and the impact to the next industrial upgrade cycle. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you, Daniel. Good afternoon, everyone.
So a quick rundown on the format from my side. Those of you that have joined our sessions previously will understand how it works. Ron will lead the presentation. There is an option to interact throughout whilst you're live on the session. So there is a Q&A chat room at the bottom of the screen. Please type your questions in there if you have any questions for Ron along the way. We will pause for a moment at the end of the session. We've left some time for a Q&A towards the end of the presentation, but I appreciate there might be questions to be asked as we go through the slides. So I will be here live on the session throughout, and I will do my best to prompt Ron about the questions as and when they come in. In order to have the full effect of the presentation, for those of you that are not in a full screen, please change the setting to full screen in order to view the presentation correctly. If anyone has any questions along the way, I'll be here, so just pop them in the Q&A chat room. But apart from that, Ron, over to you.
Okay, good stuff. Good afternoon again, and thank you, Daniel. So let me just add a few things from what you had said. So my name is Ron Brodt. I am a Director of Industrial Solution Business Development. I've been doing that for about 3 years, and prior to that, I spent about 20 years focused in the telecom space. So the topic of 5G and industrial hits a number of sweet spots for me personally. Hope it does for folks here as well. While my day job is business development, I actually invest a significant amount of my time working as part of the Open Process Automation Forum, or OPAF. That's a specification initiative managed by the Open Group. Our work in OPAF, to quote the charter, is to develop a standards-based, open, secure, and interoperable process control architecture. In other words, we're shaking things up quite a bit in the process automation space. And among the people I work with in OPAF, I know there's quite a bit of interest in 5G in the industrial space, and that's part of the reason why I'm here today. Let me also say a bit about my company, Wind River, in case you haven't heard about us before. We were founded in 1981, almost 40 years ago, and we develop software and provide professional services for the embedded market. We enable our customers to develop devices and solutions for mission-critical, safe, secure, and reliable operations. Aside from the industrial market, we also supply into aerospace and defense, medical, telco networking, and the transportation sector. Some folks that have never heard of Wind River have heard about our work with the Mars Rover program, which is one of the more cool things I get to talk about. So just before we get going, I do have a fair amount of material. It's probably more front-end loaded. I'll spend about the first 25 minutes going through some of the nitty-gritty details, and then we'll switch things up a bit and get into use cases. So with that, let's move forward. So in terms of the agenda here, maybe before I dive in, I will mention right off the bat that I'm not going to go really deep into the nitty-gritty details of 5G technology or the individual specifications. If that's what you're after, this might not be the webinar for you. Rather, I want to look at 5G from the perspective of an industrial business and what it's all about and why you should care. Perhaps things to consider if you're planning to install or upgrade an existing solution. So for the next 35 minutes or so, I'll cover the following. I'll talk about some of the significant changes that are underway in the industry. I'll provide some context around the 5G technology and what it might mean to industrial adopters. Then we'll look at some specific use cases, as I mentioned, that I see being worked by our customers today in places where 5G is a real consideration. And then finally, I'll summarize everything and hopefully we'll have some time left over for Q&A. Let me also maybe just mention and put some context around the term industrial. Industrial is one of those words that can mean different things to different people. So today, when I say industrial, I'm referring to businesses associated with process control, manufacturing and automation, robotics, even energy and transportation. And to some extent, I'd include the medical sector as well. Of course, there are variations and subsegments on each of those, but hopefully that provides some context. At Wind River, we're actively working with customers in each of these areas. Okay, so let's continue. On this slide, it's really all about challenge and change. We've got these three panels, and I'll be diving into each of these. So in recent years, there's been a growing number of challenges in the industrial space. Many of the systems in service are 15, 20, 25 years old. Some are at or past their planned end of life. We've got large numbers of staff and engineers retiring. So there is a real fear out there that knowledge of some of these older systems is being lost. And I keep hearing that it can be difficult to attract new talent. Younger engineers want to work with new technology, not the older technologies. And I'm sure we were all there at some point. So none of this should be a big surprise to most of you. Of course, in spite of all these challenges, we still have good, clean water to drink, gas for our cars, medicine for our bodies. But new technologies can make production more efficient with less downtime and better manageability. And all of this has resulted in significant changes which are now underway. So the first we call intelligence at the edge. We're seeing the increased use of distributed sensor technologies and the movement of computational systems, powerful computational systems to the edge of the network. Some of you may be familiar with the work Nemours is doing in this area. That's particularly big in Germany. There are other changes enabling even greater levels of autonomy in many sectors that are impacting manufacturing, mining, and transportation. And turning to the middle panel, there are new technologies coming into the industrial sector. We're all familiar with the changes in the IT space due to cloud computing, and now we're seeing those capabilities and learnings applied to the OT space. AR, VR. I was at a conference last year where I saw a very cool presentation by an individual working with a company using augmented reality as a way of accelerating production equipment repairs. They had experts centrally located who were helping and guiding local staff making repairs, standing in front of the equipment they were working on. They had virtual manuals and diagrams available for the local staff. And this had huge benefits because of the limited number of key experts they had in the company. And they were able to keep those centrally located, not spend so much time traveling, and this resulted in faster repairs. Another topic that attracts considerable attention these days is what people are calling the new gold in the data coming from systems. By leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies, companies can better learn better ways of using their raw materials or modifying processes to result in more efficient production, ultimately driving a better bottom line. 5G technology, I'll skip for now as that'll be the focus of most of the slides ahead. Now, aside from the new technology, we're also seeing some fundamental changes in business in the industry. One of the changes that I'm seeing firsthand is the migration away from complete end-to-end solutions from a single supplier to disaggregated products using common open interfaces, promoting a multi-vendor environment and ecosystem. This is a huge change for many companies. Rather than recouping R&D investments over decades with products consisting of hardware and software, this change is driving companies towards a more software-centric approach where their value and monetization comes largely out of the software they provide. On the other hand, It also opens up new opportunities for some suppliers as well. There may be service opportunities as suppliers leverage their years of experience and system knowledge to benefit their customers. And I can see this manifest itself as security management offerings or integration service offerings. The bottom line here, these are transformational times and transformational technologies. And companies that are agile and forward thinking can leverage these to their advantage. So let's move on. So before we really start diving into 5G, or should I say surfing, if I recall correctly, I read that the early work on the 5G standard started in or around 2009, and that's 11 years ago already today. And certainly, we've been hearing a lot about 5G for at least 4 years now, and I probably come across it several times a week in the media, in calls, and across the internet. 5G is a wave that's been building for a long time, and now it's here and live in many markets, but I personally believe it'll take years until it's fully broadly deployed around the world. So using an industrial lens, so to speak, let's take a closer look. So what is 5G? People often think of it as just another G, like, 2G, 3G, 4G, etc. I think it's natural to assume that 5G is just the next iteration on what we're all familiar with. Personally, I almost think the use of the 5G term does the technology a disservice because it makes it sound so similar. While it does represent some incremental changes in technology over 4G or LTE, for example, faster data rates we've all heard about, it makes other more fundamental changes that open the door to completely new applications and business opportunities. And really, that's the reason why it's attracting so much attention. With 5G, service providers can attract a whole new class of customers. Customers who aren't adequately serviced by the existing technologies or who can't use the existing technologies at all due to showstopper limitations. At the same time, 5G and some of the architectural foundations and spectrum choices which underlie it make it easier than ever now for non-service providers to run their own private 5G networks that are either completely disconnected from the rest of the public network or have tightly managed public links. So with that, let's look a little bit deeper into some of the technology changes that 5G brings. Just pause for a moment. All right. So on this slide, on the left, I have a list of technical features of 5G. On the right, I map the technical feature to what it could mean to the industrial market. Technical advantages are cool and very interesting, but what we really want to understand is what it can do for us in the industrial space. The first is private 5G networks. I just touched on this. So governments around the world are setting aside, or in some cases reclaiming, wireless spectrum for private 5G use. With some of the architectural changes in 5G and the use of virtualization, it's now realistic to have a large factory install and operate its own private 5G network. Not only does this have cost efficiencies, there's security advantages with such an approach as well, as you manage that network. I'll go into security in more detail in a coming slide. There's always lots of interest in security. Another is high peak data rates, up to 20 gigabits per second. This supports real-time, high-definition video streaming. Video use cases are growing all of the time, with deployments for transportation, robotics, security, and railway control. High data rates, combined with some of the other advantages we're seeing, significantly increase the reliability and the breadth of video deployments. So rather than just being an interesting add-on to a system as video has been in the past, it's effectively becoming an all-encompassing sensor feed. Latency changes are significant with 5G. 10 times lower latency, down to 1 millisecond. Depending upon application, 1 millisecond can be an acceptable tolerance for control applications. Maybe not all environments or applications. For example, plant safety. There's a lot of complex regulatory and certification challenges there, but there are expected to be many places where 1 millisecond is sufficient. 5G also brings more available bandwidth, and together with advanced antenna technologies, a broader range of spectrum choices. That means industrial applications can have, and this is important, more connected devices in a given physical area. More connected devices in a given physical area, and each is able to deliver more data. That can mean a large number of sensors can be deployed wirelessly across a plant, more than ever before. More sensors, more controllers, hopefully resulting in better insight and decision-making for a business. One of the reasons why 5G has higher bandwidth and it is able to use frequencies higher than LTE. While LTE typically goes from the high megahertz range into single-digit gigahertz, 5G has access to frequencies from 20 gigahertz all the way up to 300 gigahertz. That has both pros and cons to it, and we'll touch on that in a bit. Lastly, one of the new capabilities that comes with 5G is what's known as network slicing. This effectively results in the ability to enable multiple virtual 5G networks on a single physical infrastructure. This is borrowing from concepts, again, in the IT world relating to software-defined networks, or SDN, that you may have heard of. When you use network slicing, you get the ability to independently control bandwidth, quality of service, and access for each network slice. I can imagine a solution maybe using a dedicated application slice for ultra-low latency, for example, an industrial robot control, then a different slice for bulk data collection, and another slice for remote access. Each slice can be configured and behave differently. This can simplify and flatten networks and eliminate the need for multiple independent networks. As an industrial supplier, this can also offer up new business opportunities. In addition to the sensors, valves, actuators, control devices, suppliers could offer a complete networking solution with 5G capabilities. And then together bundle that with professional service offerings to configure and slice the network depending upon the end need. You could also see partnerships emerging where telco service providers are teaming up with industrial suppliers to offer joint solutions in this space. And we are seeing that already. The key takeaway here is change and opportunity. Learn and understand what's coming and consider how it might be used in your business. So next, 5G and edge. These are where some things come together. On this slide, I want to touch briefly on the synergies that are emerging as edge computing lines up with 5G networking. Edge computing, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about bringing powerful, sometimes scalable computing closer to the edge of the network. And by edge, I mean closer to where data is being generated and captured, not up in a cloud somewhere. Even at the edge, we're seeing the use of virtualization and container technologies being used in industrial settings. Often a single physical server is able to run multiple virtualized devices or controllers, often even collapsing multiple legacy boxes down to a single device. This brings real advantages in terms of flexibility, reduced cost in operations. And we have multiple products ourselves at Wind River in this space, and we're working with customers who are taking this path already. Now, when you add 5G into this mix, especially with the concept of network slicing that we talked about and things such as low latency and high bandwidth, the overall benefits are further magnified. Application workloads can be more fluid, moving from server to server within a site, or site to site, or even site to cloud, depending on the application and the redundancy model that it uses. To push the point even further, the 5G applications themselves and underlying server technology can be deployed in an edge environment. So the 5G right alongside your control infrastructure for devices and the virtualization all in a single device. This is exactly at Wind River what our cloud platform, Wind River Cloud Platform, achieves. We have distributed edge cloud infrastructure and application hosting. There's lots of information on Wind River Cloud Platform elsewhere, so I won't go into it any further here, but reach out if you would like to learn more. So moving on again, let's touch on one of my favorite topics, and I know many people as well, at least at a high level, is security. We'll go into that as security concerns all of us at some level. So as we look at all of the ways in which we can leverage 5G in our business, we want to know that we're on solid ground from a security perspective. It helps to know that the engineers working on 5G, developing the specs, understood from day one really the breadth and the security needs of all of the different use cases planned for 5G. Security has been foundational to the 5G specs. Not only does it build on all of the security features that we're familiar with and use on a regular basis with LTE, but it goes further. 5G adds new authentication methods, new subscriber identity and key management features over and above what's delivered in LTE. And I'll mention it again, network slicing. As many people working in industrial security will know, the ability to segment networks to protect systems is a common and well-trusted, long-standing practice. And network slicing is a tool to achieve exactly that kind of segmentation. Another feature of 5G is the ability to deploy networks using very high frequencies. I talked about this, 20 gigahertz and above. While frequencies at that level can offer very high data rates, they do have the limitation that they do not work over wide distances. They typically require a line of sight to operate. So that can be a disadvantage, but that can be leveraged as a security feature as well. 5G signals within a plant or a factory at those frequency levels will not be accessible for public consumption or eavesdropping outside the limited range of the devices that are being used. So that effectively is a form of physical security. I'd suggest that the security features of 5G really are only part of a complete holistic security solution. Below your 5G infrastructure, you'd be looking at features such as secure boot, digitally signed images for your system. You may choose to encrypt data while it's moving within the system and while it's at rest. Could be different protocols involved there. And of course, you tightly control access to the system, uniquely identifying users, their roles and privileges. This is all kind of meat and potatoes of the security world. So I look at it as 5G adds to your existing paradigm. It gives you new tools and new ways to protect your system. Excuse me. Is 5G perfect? No, of course it isn't. We're still in the early days. I have seen and expect to continue to see issues and vulnerabilities evolve. But frankly, that is the nature of software. The same thing has happened to the systems which came before it and will continue to happen into the future. But I believe that fixes will come, protections will mature, and effectively, in the end, we'll have a system that we're very confident in. Okay, moving on, really talking about maturity. On that topic, let's talk timelines, 5G timelines. As you can see from this 3GPP chart, 3GPP being the standards body that defines 5G, we're now in the midst of the first phase of commercial 5G launch and deployments. I'd expect everyone here for quite some time has been on the receiving end of ads and commercials from your local carriers and the new 5G services. I certainly have. In terms of adoption of 5G in the industrial space, we're also in the early days, even earlier. That being said, I have personally been involved in discussions and worked with a North American carrier who is developing ways to accelerate 5G deployment and solution enablement in the industrial space. That's myself, and I know that several of my EU-based colleagues have had similar discussions with their European customers. As 5G rollout continues through 2020, 2021, beyond, I expect to hear more and more industrial applications and partnerships announced with varying degrees of commercial readiness. The key thing to consider here is that these types of highly integrated solutions, especially in the industrial space, as I'm sure people listening to me here today will know, they're not easily assembled and turned up quickly. R&D, prototyping, field trials, etc. These all take considerable time, sometimes years in cases to complete. I've seen that myself. So bottom line, the sooner businesses can begin the 5G journey, the sooner ultimately be able to leverage the results. Okay, speaking of business. So we've looked at 5G and some of the underlying technical capabilities. We've looked at challenges and how the technology might help. Let's step back and reflect on what all this means to the industrial market and business. As I said earlier, the ability to deploy 5G in a box type of solution using virtualization at the edge of the network is very powerful, and it really opens the door to new opportunities. Beyond what I've discussed already here today, think about this. Most of us have heard about software as a service offerings, perhaps some platform as a service, and there's infrastructure as a service. The whole as a service is a common theme. Well, if you think about a 5G communications infrastructure and all of the IO devices and sensors, if you're a company who understands how all that fits together and can provide it, maybe there is a control as a service offering. Instead of the end user operating and maintaining their system, this could be a brand new type of service from a new type of provider ultimately. It's an interesting idea, control as a service, and I know this is being considered. I've had discussions on it. Another business possibility would be the introduction of new over-the-top service offerings. With all of the flexibility and the connectivity that 5G brings, think of network slicing, the movement towards open interfaces that was mentioned and some of the things that I've been involved with, new services could be offered that were never available before in closed proprietary systems. Consider an example like analytics, detailed analytics, or advanced system monitoring could be examples of services offered over the top, where you've opened up your system to a specific type of provider who is able to deliver that to you. By adopting and deploying 5G, edge compute, and virtualization, companies ultimately should see significant operational benefits as well. Since much of this technology ultimately shares a common underlying infrastructure, the overall management effort can be reduced. I've certainly seen tedious functions such as regularly updating software, deploying security patches. This can be simplified. The administration really made less manual and automated. Technology itself is all very interesting. I certainly love learning and understanding this, but if it doesn't impact the bottom line of a business, you're not going to take the time to invest in it and certainly not deploy it. But I believe when you put all these things together, the new flexibility, the reduction in wires, flatter networks, etc., systems can be deployed that are more customizable, more cost efficient, and ultimately drive increased value for your business. Okay, let's change gears a little bit again and start talking about some potential use cases. Let me just grab another drink of water here for a second.
Hey Ron, Dan here. There is a question that's come through as well. I'm not sure you can see that one.
I do see that now. Let me see here. How will companies, i.e. countries, deal with the huge investments in 5G while the 3G, 4G technology is not being written off, or even some countries not able to have the infrastructure to offer 5G? Equipment, software, and tools need to be redesigned. Well, certainly there are challenges. Challenges present opportunities as well, but within the 5G specification, there is also the ability to use existing standards and to work backwards with some of the older technologies. So while there's certainly high cost in introducing some of the high frequency type offerings to take advantage of all of the capabilities that you have with 5G, I still think there are interoperability options available and the ability to slowly introduce new capabilities into your network and then sort of merge forward. A comment about the audio is a bit variable. I apologize if that's the case. I don't have a 5G connection. I'm working from my home, as I'm sure many of us are. So let me know if it becomes a problem, Daniel, and I can repeat myself.
Sure, yeah, it leads, sometimes it just fades out slightly. I don't know, maybe because of the microphone or the connection perhaps, but for the most part, it seems fine, but I'll let you know if it gets worse.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, let's move on, get into these use cases. All right. Hopefully, there we go. Get that out of the way. So the first use case involves robots, or more specifically, collaborative robots, or cobots, as we call them. And I think that's a common term. Wind River has been working with a customer in this area, specifically around the area of safety. How to protect human staff who are working in an uncaged, open environment with robots. So since most cobots can move rapidly, and some have an impressive range of motion and can move quickly, safety is truly a concern. So the effort we've been involved with is looking at the integration of real-time video feeds into this environment. Video covering multiple angles and perspectives. With many moving parts, confined spaces, and other constraints, we believe wireless has a strong advantage here over wired Ethernet solutions. And as we've covered, 5G has latency and bandwidth strengths. So pulling all this together, not only does it solve those problems, but it also introduces new possibilities as well. Looking ahead, with the right 5G infrastructure in place, VR technology can be used to help train staff on how to effectively work in a cobot environment. And you can use AR as well to deliver fast and specific information and assist personnel in support and maintenance who are managing these cobots. You know, if it were 3 or 4 years ago and I heard someone like myself talking about this, I would think that that was, you know, science fiction or something I would see in Star Trek. But I've seen this with my own eyes. I know this is on the track to deployment. This is real technology. So ultimately, this is an interesting opportunity here for 5G to bring all this together. 5G is not the only piece of the safety solution, obviously, but it does enhance the overall environment. Okay, next, healthcare. Healthcare is another sector that is rapidly evolving. I have colleagues working on this space closely, and we're seeing more and more changes here than perhaps most people not involved with healthcare might expect. We sometimes say it takes a truly compelling event to provide a catalyst for change. And there are a couple of compelling events going on in healthcare right now. And I'm not referring to the COVID-19 crisis that's touching all our lives today, although I'm sure that will result in all sorts of other changes as well as we're starting to see. But what I had in mind here is that there are some government regulations being introduced around medical devices and medical device security. And secondly, there are large segments of our society as a group that are aging. And these types of events drive change. One interesting use case here is leveraging 5G for an end-to-end patient care system. Imagine someone experiencing a health issue. A healthcare worker can attach or implant a monitoring device, i.e. a sensor, to a patient. That sensor can provide live data on the patient across the entire life cycle of their journey through the healthcare system. Healthcare workers can remotely monitor patients in real time, making decisions when intervention or perhaps surgery is required. Those sensors can continue to monitor the patient when they're in the hospital, moving from surgery to recovery to their hospital room, and then even back when they get home until they're fully recovered. 5G here provides the secure connectivity and the wide mobility that truly isn't available with other solutions such as Wi-Fi. Even patient records can be securely managed in such a shared system with all of the tight compliance requirements that governments demand as well, using some of the features that I talked about with respect to 5G. All combined, These together ultimately deliver improved patient care and more efficient use of resources in the hospital. And certainly our hospitals need all of the efficiencies that they can get their hands on. Implementing the full picture here is obviously a long-term investment, but at Wind River, we're already working with hospitals and their suppliers at the device level and on platform solutions to enable them to host telco 5G applications on a single platform. Okay, next.
Hey, Ron, Dan here. You have a couple more questions if you wanted to pause for a second and answer them. One from Eric and one from Jaro.
Thank you for the hint. Eric, the higher frequencies and the lower reach signals, i.e. are able to, less able to penetrate obstacles. What's your view on this and the possible impact on investments in the infrastructure? Well, a couple of things I guess I would say about that. You use the frequency, you select the frequency based on the type of deployment. So if you're in very tight confined environments and you have a need for high bandwidth and high density, that type of signal frequency, the very high ones, would be something you would look at. But if you're in a, let's say in a deployment where you're collecting information from antenna systems or sensors distributed across a ground-based system, then you may look at some of the lower megahertz range, or I should say the lower gigahertz range, the high megahertz, overlapping with some of the frequencies that used today, just because you can penetrate. So that's one thing. The other, I didn't go into it, but I did touch on or mention, advanced antenna technologies. Some of the antenna technologies use a concept such as beamforming. So there are ways of essentially shaping the wave and reflecting waves in a way that, with the right computational abilities, allows you to push the envelopes, so to speak, in the signals. So hope that helps. Next one from Jero. What is the ideal 5G implementation replacing strategy on the corporate industrial level, enabling an end-to-end supply chain, given the current complex and legacy systems or applications already in place and working across organizations? Wow, that's a mouthful. What is the ideal 5G implementation replacing strategy? I don't know that there is a single, is there a single strategy? I would begin with really having a hard look in terms of what are the problems within your particular solution that are important to you? What are the constraints that you're facing? And prioritize those. And then within your existing supply chain, are there suppliers who are introducing these new technologies? And certainly all over the place, we're seeing uptake and interest. Everyone wants to know how to use the latest technologies. So see what is out there within your supply chain. And if you don't find what you need, you can further expand, look at some of the operators within your geographic area. As I said, there are partnerships that are taking place. And of course, my own corporate plug, companies such as Wind River are actively involved in all of the stages here, working with end users, working with suppliers, working with operators. So I hope that helps, gives you some ideas anyway. Okay. Let's continue on. Close this. All right, let's switch gears to the transportation. So this is a use case I'm sure we're all quite familiar with in the automotive transportation space. The changes going on here are, dare I say, fast and furious. It's an exciting time to be working in the automotive space for sure. I'll go through this one a little bit more quickly. So if you take a look at this graphic, we can see here 5G being used in a variety of ways for backhaul communications, from edge sites to central servers, from vehicles to edge servers and back, and there's edge coming up again, and 5G being used for fast vehicle to vehicle communications. So some of the examples of services here can include the timely delivery of high definition maps, or HD maps as it's called, as well as intelligent driving applications, either autonomous or assisted and cooperative. And we're certainly seeing more and more of those today, particularly along the assisted route, I think is working its way into our collective consciousness and building our trust. Another is the expanded use of over-the-air software updates to vehicles, or SOTA as it's called. That is particularly important in this space to deliver, security and safety updates quickly, rapidly, and securely. And we have product in that area. The 5G data rates and the low latency that are inherent in 5G are obviously very important in this space. My company at Wind River, we've been very active in automotive. We have a complete separate company unit dedicated to it. It's really been a natural fit for us as we're established in safe and secure environments, and we're working with service providers on 5G. So this kind of brings everything together for us. Okay, move on to the next slide. Next use case. There we go. This one is, I guess, rolling up now. Next generation train control and management use case. So as you may be aware, there are initiatives in multiple markets associated with railway systems. As I said earlier, talking about compelling events, the compelling event, so to speak, tied here to the need to is the need to upgrade train safety systems. I'm sure many of us have heard of serious train incidents or derailments that have occurred in recent years, certainly in Canada, and changes are being introduced as a result. Now here there are numerous uses for sensors of all types and for real-time video capture and processing. These can be related to train velocity, safety and physical security, even environmental controls. Again, that whole 5G and video theme is coming up again as video can play such an important role here. Together, all of this, as you might expect, generates huge amounts of data and on a continuous basis. So rather than collecting this up and then offloading it at a station, this can be processed locally on edge servers or backhauled on a continuous basis using 5G for archiving or compliance purposes, even offloading advanced processing and analytics. So at the same time, edge computing, as I'm seeing, where multiple systems are being collapsed and virtualized onto a single server. So it's the combination of technologies. So in addition to train management, safety, and control, it brings new service offerings as well, from simple things like improved passenger entertainment and connectivity. We all demand our internet fix, and having high-speed, rapid internet on a continuous basis is valuable to us. Predictive maintenance, going through some of that data that's collected, understanding what's going on. There are monetization opportunities there. Even dynamic advertising, revenue generating opportunities for train operators. So we're seeing that 5G is an ideal technology really to take on a significant role when it comes to next generation train control management. So one last use case before we wrap up here. This one is particularly interesting since there's so much going on, and that's the Smart Cities Initiative. And Smart Cities, not really a single use case, but it's a whole set of use cases, sharing a common theme, I would say, and that's data. So traffic management to deal with the ever increasing urban congestion problems many of our cities face. Somewhat controversially, especially these days, the use of video and audio monitoring, even in some cases facial recognition for crime detection and crime deterrence. Cities spend considerable sums of money on lighting. So there's cost reduction opportunities to be explored by using connected sensor technologies and data. Who is where, what's moving where, etc. Even better management of parking inventory and the revenues associated with parking. Kind of an overlooked but a very important area for us in our cities. The ability to deliver information to visitors at the right location at the right time in formats that they can easily absorb. And you could easily see that being used to generate revenue for a city as well with advertising. really this list is limited by our imaginations, as I'm sure there will be more and more applications evolve in this space as cities experiment, innovate, and share the results with each other. But I'm sure you can imagine, to truly scale into the larger cities and to deliver the kind of benefits that we're talking about with the real-time aspects to it, the sensor density you would expect to have in such a space. 5G makes this all happen. 5G gives you that capability. It may feel like we're living in a connected world today, but I think that really we're going to be taking that to a whole new level once we see 5G roll out in larger and larger markets. Okay, good news. We've got through the main deck. So just to summarize here, what we talked about is that many of the systems that we use and rely on today are built on legacy technologies that are working and are held together, but ultimately there can be more efficiencies in using some of these new technologies, and 5G in particular. So 5G, it aligns well with other technologies such as edge computing, virtualization, and augmented reality, virtual reality. They share common underlying benefits and needs in terms of demands on infrastructure. We see 5G being driven really by software. I'm sure we've heard the expression, or you've heard the expression, software eating the world. I'm seeing that more and more. Happy to be part of a software company. We even see that in terms of the ability to deliver both private and public implementations for 5G. 5G will enable new business models that we've talked about through these capabilities and through some of the standard-based APIs that are offered. And 5G ultimately collapsing much of these different technologies, flattening networks, simplifying things will result in efficiencies for deployment, operations, and management, in more automation and day-to-day management of systems. Ultimately, 5G will impact the industrial space and the industrial edge. You can bet that if you're not thinking about it, your competitors are thinking about it, how they can augment their existing offerings, how they can build it into their products, how they can introduce new services and new technologies. So I hope this presentation at least exposed you to some of the different thinking that is going on in this space, some of the benefits, some of the capabilities that 5G is bringing, and you know, encourages you to reach out and learn more and think about how you can leverage them. So let me have a look and see if we have any more questions. Okay, Keith, what countries and companies are leading in 5G, and what is the advice? What advice is sourcing the technology from? What is the advice in sourcing the technology from? I'm not sure if I'm the right person to talk about countries and companies leading, because it is such a global effort. You know, the 3GPP consortium who has developed 5G specification, there are literally people from practically every country involved. I have been involved in specification efforts, not in 3GPP, but in ETSI. And I know there are people from all over. So while there are obviously companies who are leading in this space, I don't want to plug individual companies, but the companies that develop the infrastructure that we use within our networks today all have offerings in terms of 5G and are moving forward with that. We're certainly seeing more and more live networks rolling up in Asia, throughout Europe, and in the United States, North America, in South America, and I'm sure in Australia as well. So don't know if that is skating around the specifics you were looking for, but it's not too hard to reach out to your favorite search engine and have a look and see where 5G is coming from in terms of the offerings. Okay, here's another one. Kara, what are some of the biggest stumbling blocks you're seeing today moving into new phases of implementation? Thoughts on how to avoid? Largest stumbling blocks, I think, I see companies perhaps not spending enough time to really to get involved into prototype. Maybe they were waiting for it to happen. I think really getting involved, starting to study, starting to learn, and to prototype is valuable. In this space, typically the industrial community moves slower than in other spaces, other segments, I would say, because of the importance, the human life considerations, the environmental concerns. So that's good and that's natural, but get started on it. Start to consider these benefits and to push back against some of the challenges that we talked about in things such as, losing expertise, inability to attract talent. Working in this space will start to turn back the tide in those areas. And certainly having the right talent who is interested and wants to learn and work with these technologies is another thing. Any kind of change involves large cultural issues. So I think that the culture is probably one of those factors. James, you referenced transportation and train lines. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for 5G? Well, as I mentioned, wireless technology has always been very big in the railway industry. But I think the movement towards the newer advanced train systems, train control systems, and safety really being driven by regulatory governmental change in various markets is one of the important factors here that's driving this. So I talked about some of the advantages where 5G can be used, why companies are looking at it in that space. So I'm not sure there's much further that I can add. Certainly not, not specifically in different geographic areas, because I know we've been involved in Asia with change that's been occurring, and especially in Europe as companies been implementing change. And I'd say also in Canada, just in terms of my own personal visibility. We're a broad company. I'm sure there's a lot more going on than I personally see, but everyone in these industries, in the railway industry, is looking at leveraging the technology. I'm able to take any more questions if you have them. Let me pause, take a quick sip of my tea here. Hey, Benoit, could we deploy 5G by equipping every single sensor and actuator? Working for power system operator, today we gather data at the substation level and then communicate that at a central level. Will this local gathering remain relevant? Well, it's interesting. I haven't had the opportunity to go through it in detail. We just published a position paper yesterday on the energy market and 5G. I could certainly provide you a look at that, but from my understanding, the sort of hub and spoke system of collecting data and centralizing it is one model that may change with the introduction of 5G for sure. I don't know the specific use case in terms of the sensor density that you would need, but there are all sorts of opportunities to superimpose on your existing infrastructure another layer of sensor and connection management in parallel with what you have, maybe feeding that into existing systems or running it through a different methodology. But absolutely, 5G is going to give you new capabilities, especially the density, the longer, the long range, depending upon which signal frequency range that you use. Hope that helps. Biggest thing there would be, as I said, we do have a paper on this that goes more into detail. That power is not specifically an area that I have a lot of familiarity with, but I know there's a lot of change going on there as well. Certainly as consumers, we are all interested in more power coming online, more diversity and more green energy. And I know there's a lot going on in Europe in this area as well. Okay, I see interested in paper, great. We'll see if we can get that to you. How are we doing, Daniel?
Yeah, right on time, actually. A couple of minutes left. So if anyone has any further questions, then please do fire them across. With regards to Benoit's comment regarding the paper, you know, I'd be happy to facilitate any introductions after the call. So if people want to ask any further questions to you, Ron, you know, I'll exchange the details and let these guys reach out to you directly, and hopefully you'll be able to follow up in due course.
Yeah, absolutely. Just in closing, I guess I'll mention a couple of things. I've briefly touched on some of the products that Wind River has. Folks may be familiar with VxWorks. That is our real-time operating system. We have Wind River Linux, which is commercially supported Linux distribution. Wind River Cloud Platform. This is our open source production grade Kubernetes platform for edge cloud infrastructure. I referred to it a few times today because there are a number of large operators who are using Wind River Cloud Platform for their 5G needs. And we also have our Helix virtualization platform, which is a real-time embedded type 1 hypervisor, which does some of the things I talked about, where you can collapse multiple devices onto a single server through virtualization. So some interesting technology, certainly, that we have that assists in companies making this transition. I think that's about it.
Okay, perfect. Ron, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. It was a pleasure to have you on board today. Really insightful presentation. I'm sure all of the other participants enjoyed it. We had some great questions. As most of you guys know, we, Industry IoT, have ramped up our digital agenda quite significantly. I think we're hosting a virtual workshop almost every week at the moment. So, you know, our mission here is to keep everybody connected and online through these challenging times. So, you know, of course, Ron, you are more than welcome to join us online for the future sessions as well, but we'll keep you guys updated via email. And Ron, thanks again for your time today. It was great.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I appreciate the opportunity.
Cheers. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.